Hey, this is Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society Podcast, reminding you that this podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the other great podcasts on the network at selfdefenseradio.net.
This episode of the Unload and Show Clear podcast is made possible by our patrons, Jesse Walker, Scott Martin, Frank DeCastro, and Daryl Easley. Thank you so much for your support. To find out how you can support the show, visit unloadpodcast.com/patrons.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear. And now, here's your host, the Slayer of Non-Threats, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, episode number 159. I'm your host, the Slayer of Non-Threats, Lloyd Bailey. This is a show about the men and women of IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. We're talking about the everyday people who make this sport what it is. They volunteer their time, their money, their hard work. They improve their skills. They grow the sport. They put on local and sanctioned matches all around the country, all around the world, every weekend of the year. Happy New Year to all of you. Hope you had a Merry Christmas or a Happy Hanukkah. I hope you had a safe and a Happy New Year. Welcome to 2021. 2020 was a dumpster fire thanks to COVID-19 and other things, but it looks like 2021 is set to make up for it. Today we're going to give you a really quick look at what's coming for the first 2 months of 2021. Then we're going to meet a new guest. January, IDPA is just going to be off and running. I think there's 9 matches or over the next 8 weeks, something, or if you don't count the one in Europe, I think we're talking like 8 matches in 7 weeks, something like this. We're going to start the season with the Healy Arms South Mountain Showdown in Arizona, which I think is sort of traditionally the first match of the year. It's directed by former guest Eric Van Haster. And the Arctic Blast match in Pennsylvania. Those 2 matches are coming up next weekend, and hopefully we will be reviewing the results of those 2 matches in the next episode 160 in 2 weeks. Then we're going to wander around the East Coast for a few weeks between Pennsylvania and Florida and Maryland before we head back out west for some of the Western matches that get started out here before the summer heat kicks in. A lot of the matches here in Texas, Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, those matches start to kick off in the spring, March, April, May, before the summer heat kicks in. And so we're going to have a very, very busy, and in 2020, those matches all got canceled or postponed, and they got moved to the fall. So we had a very busy fall. I expect we're going to have a very busy spring as well. So we're going to see the Florida State match on the 4th weekend in January, followed by the Chesapeake Cup in Maryland on the 1st weekend in February. Then we're going to be back in Pennsylvania for the Castle Pistol Club Indoor Winter Classic for the 2nd week of February. Back to Florida for the South Florida Defensive Challenge the week after that, and then rounding out February at the Springfield Armory Missouri State Indoor Carry Championship on February 27th, and that's when everything starts to kick off, starting at the beginning of March with things in, I think, the Gulf Coast Regional down here in Texas. So going to be a wild ride for the first 2 months this year, especially on the East Coast. And we're going to be reviewing all of it in the coming weeks. Hopefully COVID doesn't rear and the lockdowns don't rear their ugly heads again and cause us problems. But fingers crossed, things are going to be a lot of fun this year. So look for us to review those first 2 matches in 2 weeks in episode number 160 when we meet another new guest whom we've mentioned in previous episodes. I'm not going to spill the beans on that just yet. Okay, so it's time to meet today's guest. Back in episode 157, we reviewed the results from the 2020 Space Coast Challenge, which was down at the Port Malabar Rifle and Pistol Club in Florida. Well, today, we're going to get a chance to chat with the man responsible for directing the match, the Rocket Man himself, Paul Zima. Our special guest was the match director of the 2020 Space Coast Challenge, Paul Zima from Palm Bay, Florida. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, tell us a little about yourself, and I'm excited to hear about this because I saw your bio on IDPA.com. Tell us what you do for a living there in Palm Bay.
Well, my wife and I are both retired Air Force veterans. I spent just about 26 years in the Air Force. My wife is 20 years. My son is a captain in the Air Force, and my youngest son is a first-year pre-med student, wants to be a physical therapist to fix all those broken bones in his dad's body. So I predominantly, my Air Force career, I was an intel analyst and did a little collection work for a long time, and I ended my Air Force career as the command chief of Patrick Air Force Base, so basically the senior enlisted advisor to the commander. Presently, I am the operations manager for the contractor that runs the what is now, as of today, known as the Patrick Space Force Base and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station range. So we are actually the busiest launch port in the world. Last year, we launched more rockets than all the other launch ports combined. And in my operations position, it's my team that schedules, plans, and carries out console operations for every single launch that goes off the Eastern Range.
Very cool. Well, thank you to to you and your family for your service. And so how did you end up involved with rockets, and what all goes into the planning and oversight of a project like that? What's your week like leading up to a big launch?
Well, it's for the most part, the last 2 weeks are what we call the terminal phase of the rockets launching. It takes about 90 days to get your average rocket on the Space Force calendar.
Okay.
So that's everything from an initial acquisition of the planning documentation, which tells us about the rocket, where it's going to go, where it's going to fly, how fast it's going to fly, what the mark events are, where it's going to turn the engines on, turn off, lose some boosters, where it's going to separate into the second stage and actually get into space. So as we like to call it, kind of in simple language, launching a rocket is just like driving your car. You've got a left lane line and a right lane line, so your yellow and your white lines. Well, rocket's the same way. While you're driving your car, as long as you stay between those lines, you're a good rocket. You're in your lane and you're doing good things. Rockets are no different. So when it goes into space, we know exactly where it's going to go, and we know exactly when it's going to get there, down to the microsecond. So when it leaves the ground, we're tracking it, and it's our contract that runs all the equipment to track the rockets. So we track it with the hope that it stays on course. If it veers off course, we also have equipment where the Air Force has to take drastic action, and it has to blow it up. So if it starts to veer outside those lines, the purpose of the 45th Space Wing is to monitor public safety. So in case anything goes wrong with that rocket, if it pitches over and goes toward Orlando and Disney World, for instance, they're going to blow that rocket up before it has a chance to do there. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. We operate the equipment, we do the planning and scheduling. So great team, unbelievable time to be in the rocket business. Like I said, Elon Musk has changed the dynamic with his SpaceX rockets, and I'll tell you, it's an exciting time, and we are just having a great time launching rockets. I don't know how else to describe it.
How many launches do you generally oversee in a year's time?
Last year we did 25 separate rocket launches, but you have to understand, of those 25, we had 42 separate countdowns, which means they went into a countdown. We didn't launch a rocket for various reasons. Could be weather, it could be a satellite issue, could be a rocket issue. And of those 25 rockets and 42 countdowns, we had 62 slips in the schedule.
Okay.
So it's very dynamic. A rocket will come on for some reason. It may not make the launch date. Weather might be bad. Again, rocket could be bad. other issues. COVID, believe it or not, has delayed a couple launches this year. So we were a little bit down from what we thought we would be last year at 25. But
wow.
this year we think we're going to make 50, which is going to be an unbelievable accomplishment for the Space Coast.
Oh, wow. So almost one a week.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that's
amazing.
They tend to cluster. Like I said, this week we've got 2 on the calendar, but next week and hopefully through Christmas, we'll have none.
Hopefully. Well, very cool. So, all right. So where did the interest in guns come from? Did you get interested in guns as a kid, or was this part of your top secret intel Air Force work?
Well, the interest probably came from my dad. He was a volunteer and then a paid police officer in a little town called Woodridge, Illinois, and Lake County, Illinois, Lake County Ranger. My uncle was also a detective in Chicago, where I grew up. So I guess it's always been there, of course, through the Boy Scouting and whatnot. So I've always had an interest in guns. And of course, when I grew up and got old enough to own my own, the very, very first gun I ever bought when I joined the military was a Colt Python. And that is, I still have that gun, and it is in absolute pristine shape.
Nice. And now those things are finally coming back.
Yes, I saw that.
And you have one of the originals. Very cool. So now this was back in Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
I was actually kind of a strange. I grew up in Chicago, but I'm originally a cheesehead from Wisconsin. My parents lived in Wisconsin, but for job purposes, when I was about 5 years old, we moved down to the Chicago area, and that's for the most part where I spent my life until I was 18 years old, and then I joined the Air Force, and that became my home.
Gotcha. How did you get introduced to competitive shooting?
Well, we've got Port Malabar Rifle and Pistol Club about 8-9 miles from the house. And I joined the range and just to hone up on some shooting skills, rifle and pistol. I've always been intrigued more from pistols than rifles. And just by coincidence, probably they were holding an IDPA match. And he probably doesn't know it, but one of the original startups for the IDPA at Port Malabar, Mr. Alan Baker, he was there. And I didn't recognize who he was at the time. Of course, much later I did. I was just watching these people in an action shooting match, and it just intrigued me. I thought, you know what? That would be neat to try. So I just stopped this individual. Turned out to be Alan Baker by coincidence. He was the match director. I started talking about what they were doing, and he said, "Hey, come on out. We'll show you. It's very friendly. It's very not, you can be as competitive as you want." And next month I signed up. I started to shoot, and that was early 2014. And believe it or not, I actually competed in the Florida State Championship that Alan was the match director for. Self-admission, I did DQ. The last stage of that match, I shot through a prop, which I'm actually looking at right now. It was a shooter's bag. I reached in the bag, and I don't know why, but I flipped the safety off my 1911 SIG, and as I pulled it out of the bag, it snagged, and the bullet didn't.
Well, you learned early, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Well, they say, it's like a Harley. They say there's only 2 Harley owners, those that drop them and those that are about to. And well, DQs are the same way. Those that have and those that are about to.
Right. It's not a question of if, but when.
You betcha.
So, so how long after that first match, that first local match that you went out and saw, how long after that was this sanctioned match, the Florida State match?
I think it was about 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
It was a big ask, and of myself, and I talked with Alan, a couple of the folks, and they said, just come on out, go slow, be sure of your shots, and don't worry about your score. All great advice, and like I said, I did pretty well up until that mistake, and when I shot through the through the bag, and it did go in the berm. It was no chance. Right. It wasn't so much a safety, other than the fact that you shot a prop.
Right.
And I made some close friends because the individual that DQ'd me, Carl Culp, a great CSO from Minnesota. He and his wife were SOing that stage. And I've shot with the Culps in Wisconsin, 2 national matches, and several matches down here in Florida. So through it all, I made some great friends.
Yep, absolutely. So how did you end up with the 1911? There, you started out shooting your first handgun was the Colt Python. How did the progression go from there?
I've always liked the 1911 frame. I like the weight of it. I like the feel of it. I like the way the bullet flies, and I like just the way it shoots. So as I started to look at the guns that I owned at the time, I had a 1911 a SIG TAC Ops. So I said, okay, that's going to be my competition gun. So I started with 45s, and I like it because it's more of a challenge. I get less rounds than everybody else, so I've got to be more tactical in my decisions. And my reloads, of course, are completely different. And of course, you've got to plan things completely different. So for the most part, right now, I shoot CDP and CCP. I've got a Springfield Range Officer Elite, little 9mm. So that's my other gun that I predominantly shoot with.
Gotcha. So after that first DQ, where did you go from there? What was next after that fateful day?
Well, I just kept shooting local matches, kind of honing my skills. I started to talk more and more with the folks that were actually shooting with us, and I found that there are some absolutely phenomenal people in IDPA. That's kind of one of my core beliefs as a match director. Is we're a volunteer sport with volunteer participants, and people do it for the camaraderie, to be in an area where you're with shared and like-minded people as far as the firearms. And so my job as the match director was to facilitate that and put it on steroids and give everybody a nice challenging match. And that's what I found IDPA to be. It's just somewhere where I can enjoy the camaraderie. You get on a great squad, and these are folks like for instance, like Stephen Lowe. He's just an individual that's just got the biggest heart in the world. He generally shoots CCP, same number of rounds as I do in CDP, and he'll just put you under his wing and say, "Hey, why did you do that? Or have you considered doing this?" Not in a threatening way, or "Hey, but just let's look at this." Mark Few is another one. I mean, I can go on and on about the people I've met that just help you in your shooting disciplines and to help improve yourself, if that's what you want. If you just want to go out there and run and gun, there's folks that'll help you with that as well.
That's pretty easy to do.
Yes, it is.
It's the ones that tell you to slow down. Those are the ones you need to listen to.
Absolutely.
So who among that group would you say has been the biggest influence on your shooting career?
Oh, without a doubt, Dwayne Charter. I've traveled with him to Minnesota and a couple of nationals. We travel around the Southeast and shoot together. We practice together when we get a chance. I mean, he's just, I don't think I've met anybody more knowledgeable about the rules, the rule book, and match setup than what Dwayne is. And he's just an all-round great guy and a great personality. He's there to help, and he will do anything to help another human being that is in need. And I just like him. I just like being around him. And matter of fact, he was the one that convinced me to be match director. He had hosted the previous two Space Coast Challenges. And then, of course, we've got Randy Milan Williams, who took over from Alan, who Dwayne took over from. So I've got a long lineage of great match directors down here that had a big reputation to live up to. And, with their help, I pulled it across the line with a great team. That's what it come down to. So very, very happy to be a part of it. So
I was going to ask you about that, and you mentioned it a moment ago, and I kind of led in the interview with that. How did you end up in that role? Was that just sort of a natural progression? Had you been working matches and then directing local matches, and then it just sort of, you worked your way into it naturally, or did it come to a point where Dwayne said, "All right, I need to step back. You would be the perfect person," and you just sort of got nominated for it? How did it happen?
I think it was probably more of the latter, but I'd put a little more teaming event. Mm-hmm. The Port Malabar, it had been a long time. I guess I have to digress a little bit. The Southeast and Florida it's been a long time since we had anything above a tier 2 match. And for various reasons. South Florida, Rick Lund's place has hosted Tier 3 matches before. We had hosted Tier 3 matches, and then they kind of disappeared and all kind of turned into Tier 2s. So the Port Malabar, we've got the unbelievable facilities here, so we wanted to host a larger match. And we got to get there and say, okay, what's the appetite for the Space Coast Challenge? Can we put stages together that are fair and fun and challenging, which we do have a reputation for doing? And then, okay, can we get the team together? Can we get the pieces, parts? Is the budget there? And we all had a meeting and said, okay, now who's going to run this? And they all kind of turned at me in unison and said, we think you should be the one to go. And I said, well, I've never done this before. I've never been a match director before. And that was about 2 years ago. And they said, well, we can fix that by making you match director of our local matches. And so I said, you know what? We'll give it a shot. And that's when I learned how much I didn't know about setting up stages and about IDPA. But again, with Dwayne's and Randy's and Alan's help, they set me up not to fail. That's really what it comes down to. I could not be more thankful for the three of those individuals. And there's so many more. Jim Flume, who actually runs the range, has just done a phenomenal job, and he took so much off of our plate, as far as the range setup and getting the range prepared to host 200 some odd shooters.
Did never having directed a match before, was it? And you talk about the teamwork aspect of it. How did you divvy everything up? Did some of your experience, your Air Force and your current experience at the managing the launching of rockets and the teams that are involved there, did some of that come into play with trying to organize everything and assign and delegate authority to different people and get it all done? Because jumping in and taking over and directing a match for the first time, especially something like the Space Coast, is not an easy task.
You hit the nail on the head. I think, throughout my entire career, be it my military career as the operations manager for RG Next, the company I work for, it all comes down to teamwork. And what I've always prided myself on is being able to assemble and build successful teams. And I think the key to doing that is finding people that make you better in areas where you're not. In other words, if I've got a weakness, I need to find somebody that knows more about a specific subject than I do. For instance, I've got a ton of engineers that work for me. I'm not an engineer, but I speak engineer, and I can translate engineer into common language so people can understand it. And I think being a match director is kind of the same way. Is you got all these technical issues to work through, and Randy Milan Williams is probably the greatest stage designer I've ever met. But like anybody, if left alone to their own devices, they can tend to get on steroids. So we say, okay, we take all of his best ideas and say, okay, well, how can we put this into practical shooting terms? So the challenge is we had marksmen show up, but we had world-class masters show up as well. So how do we make the world-class master walk away thinking, holy cow, I work for that? And then we take that marksman, walk away thinking, holy cow, I had fun and I had a lot to learn, but you know what? That was a pretty fair match. And based on the feedback we got, I think we divvied up the teamwork and the folks that were on the staff. I think we hit the nail on the head. I'm very, very proud of what we've accomplished and how the Space Coast Challenge turned out.
What is it for those who have not had the pleasure of attending a Space Coast Challenge? What's sort of the, aside from the locale, what is the sort of the claim to fame for the what can shooters expect out of a Space Coast Challenge from year in, year out?
Well, what we do is we provide each stage you have to think about. There's going to be multiple ways to shoot it. There's going to be, you can speed up or you can slow down, which is something we want. We want to work within the rules as much as we possibly can. And in fact, we want to challenge those rules. For instance, there's the most popular rule out there is you can't make me do anything that is a non-shooting action. Yes, we can. And we figured out a way to do that. For instance, one of our stages basically was we called it air pack. Is you started out with something in your in your weak hand. It was an air pack, which was, in our case, we constructed a moderately heavy 4-inch PVC pipe. There were 4 of them bolted together with a handle, very, very awkward to carry. And you had to keep it in your support hand, and you had to transport it about 12 yards and then deposit it in a very, very, tight or fairly tight box. And if you didn't, there were 3 targets that were not going to expose herself at the end. So you had to get that air pack there somehow, whether you carried it, whether you picked it up, whether you put it down, whether you shot one-handed or put it on the ground and shot freestyle. That was all up to you. So you had multiple ways to do that. But in the end, that air pack had to go into its container, and that container activated 3 pneumatic movers. Which one of them exposed themselves for a short period of time and disappeared, and the other one was swinging between 2 non-threats. So you had to negotiate. That was just one stage. And we tried to do that with every single stage. The kind of logo for our match was called Lost in Space, not just because of the old 60s TV series, but because that's what we wanted the shooters to do. We wanted you to lose yourself in the space of that particular stage. Either you're going to get confused and overwhelmed, and we tempted you to go fast, but if you looked at the pace of your shooting, there were actually ways to figure it out, and based on the scores, there were people that did that.
Does everything sort of have that sort of aeronautics or space or local sort of theme?
This year we did, yes.
Okay.
Others, in past years, we were also known for a train stage where we actually had to move along a cabled train, and you had to work your way in and out of 3 different windows. That was way back in 2014. And that was a stage that was just overwhelming for a lot of shooters, myself included. I didn't do well on it. I specifically remember that one. But they're always going to take you out of your comfort zone. And I think that's where we really need to be as pistol shooters, action shooters, is you got to be taken out of your comfort zone. We all go to matches where we basically blast away at targets, and some are far, some are near, some are tight, some are not tight. But when you combine all of those over the space of a larger scale competition, that's where the stress starts to build. And like I said, the comments that I've heard was the toughest match I've shot in the last 2 years. Can't wait till next year, those types of things. So again, couldn't be more pleased, but we don't try to, stump the shooter. But on the other hand, we want the shooter to think, because ultimately that's what you're going to have to do with a firearm in a real situation, is you're going to have to think.
Gotcha. All right. Well, getting back to your own shooting career, let's talk about some of the most challenging, fun or challenging or odd or interesting situations you found yourself in on a major match. Aside from stages that you've from this year's Space Coast Challenge, talk about some of the stages that you remember from previous sanctioned matches that you think back on and you say that stick out in your mind as, wow, that was a really fun stage, or that was really challenging, or a lot of fun, or that you have a funny story because you really messed it up.
Well, let me start out with the last one first. I was down at Nationals. I believe it was 2018. I was just going there to shoot. It was in Alabama, and I was right at the ready line. I had my eyes closed. I'd watched the Wilson Combat Team, so they're visualizing every single shot, and I was doing that. I was in the moment. One of my shooting partners came up to me and said, "Oh, Paul, this is what you got to do. When you get to this point, you need to jump way far to the left, because that takes the up-down non-threat out of play."
Oh, no.
So I changed my entire shooting plan instantly. I went bam, 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 got my first 2 targets out of the way. I got to what should have been a cover point, and all I was thinking was jump far to the left, and it had an electric eye. So I jumped all the way out to the left, broke cover, and I brought in an entire array of targets. I shot the hell out of them targets. I'm telling you, I was like down 4 for what I actually did shoot. The problem was I was out of cover. I brought 2 of the targets that I just shot already into play, so I reshot those. And then I reloaded my gun for the second time.
Oh, no.
And then I proceeded downrange to around another corner to take more shots. I got to the last 2 targets. I put 2 rounds in the first target, reached down for my mag, and there was no mag. And I'm looking back, and Dwayne was there, and he's watching me shoot, and I'm panicking, thinking, oh, and I see where I jumped through cover. I have 2 mags laying on the ground. There's 1 mag in my gun, which is now laying at my feet because it's empty, and I've got 1 more target to shoot. And it was at that point the SO said, if finished, unload and show clear. And I knew what I did. It was at that point. So the individual who told me that, he came up, he apologized, and Dwayne, he thought I DQ'd because he didn't know, he wasn't counting my shots. He was just watching me shoot. And so I told him what I did. So I went between the flagrant and the target that I didn't shoot. I think I went about 34 down on that stage.
Oh.
Only 4 of those were misses. The rest of them were penalty points. So that was the worst experience. Now let me tell you about the best experience I've ever seen.
Okay.
Shooting at IDPA. The exact same nationals. I think it was Mike Seeklander won that year.
Mm-hmm.
His first shot out of his gun or thereabouts was right through the head of a non-threat on his very first stage. So if anybody had reason to be upset, it was Mike. And he was back at the that I had not even started shooting yet. I was in an afternoon crew, and he was kind of starting off his. This dad and a young man came over to him while he was reloading his magazines, and I'm sure trying to go over the stage in his head. I'm not sure what Mike goes through beyond reading his books and how he says stay in the mental game. And he really proved it that day because his dad and his son came over, and he tapped Mike Seeklander on the shoulder, and he says, Mr. Seeklander, he said, can I introduce you to my son? He's a real fan. And I saw something that just epitomizes why people want to shoot IDPA. He stopped everything, put his magazine down, and he treated that young man like he was the only person on the face of the earth. He walked over to the safe table. He watched the young man grip his gun. He played with his hands a little bit. He kind of worked on his grip. And then the dad in the end took a picture with the son and Mike Seeklander, and he handed him a business card, and he says, here, you send me that picture and I will autograph it for you and get it back. That is after he dropped a stage. He didn't really drop a stage to you and me.
Right.
He wouldn't have dropped a stage, but to him, yeah, obviously.
Right.
That to this day remains probably one of the greatest experiences I've had at any match anywhere. I've got SO stories the same way. I mean, it's just a great group of people. And I think that epitomizes what we're really all about. As I said earlier, it's a volunteer sport with volunteer participants and volunteer folks that help make it run.
Yep. And Mike is a great guy, and all the Wilson Combat team are really great people. But throughout, like you said, throughout the sport, you meet amazing people. It's one of the reasons that I love doing this podcast is you get to learn a little bit about the people that you see at these matches and get to know a little better and come to appreciate just what great people that we get to hang out with. One of our early guests, I think it was Scott Longhorn from episode 14, who said, once you get IDPA friends, you realize how uncool your old friends really are.
I can agree with that. Not that I don't have other friends that are uncool, but it's just, as I said earlier, when you're around people of like mind and like hobby and like belief systems, I think you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's the you've got a very busy life with the job and family and match directing, and what's the practice routine like for you? What are you trying to accomplish for yourself as a shooter?
Well, I think as I'm coming near 2 years as a match director, so I'm looking to maybe not necessarily pass the reins, but definitely bring somebody else into it and getting back into the fundamentals and the practicing. I'm finally going to take a shooting course, I think in April.
Mm-hmm.
I signed up here at the local match competition shooting course, and just trying to improve the skills. I mean, that's probably the first thing that's hardest to swallow as a match director is I'm an average shooter at best. I don't claim to be anything else. In fact, I'm according to my sons, I'm first loser in 4 separate states. So I've got the plaques to prove it. But I would very much like to take, a CDP first place. Obviously Match Bump is in there somewhere, but that's not necessarily the goal. I would just like to have a match where I shoot my best regardless of placement. And to do that, I've got to get to the fundamentals. I got to start shooting with people like Stephen Lowe and Jamie Powell, who just say, pace, shoot your pace, not someone else's. Don't watch someone else shoot your match. And I just want to do that. And that's why I like shooting with Dwayne, because Dwayne shoots his match, and he's just gotten better and better over the years. And as match director, I'm more worried about the match running than I am shooting. And no excuse, ultimately I pull the gun and I pull the trigger. But I'd like to get back to those fundamentals and just improve for the sake of improving.
What do you think? You and I are in that same sort of marksman sharpshooter level, sort of looking for that opportunity to get better. What do you think is the biggest hurdle for the new shooter who is in that, novice marksman area trying to get better? Do you think is it the taking or finding or making the time to practice? Is it learning for me, it was the mental game. Not to say that I've figured it out, but there was a light bulb moment with the mental game. What was it? What do you think it is, or what was it for you?
I think it's I'd go 60-40. I'd go 60% mental game, 40% practice.
You're starting to sound like Yogi Berra now.
Yeah. Well, something about that. Practice is important because muscle memory is important. You've got to work on the fundamentals. But as much as I practice, my reloads will stay within the same realm of time. My draw and fire that first accurate shot is going to stay within a couple of tenths of a second to be roughly the same time, no matter what I do. But it's that mental game, that preparing for a stage and understanding that planning helps, but you can't be so rigid as to stick with your plan that you intentionally miss shots because you threw a shot, but you're not going to make it up because that's not part of your reload plan.
Right.
So if I were to advise novice shooters, newer shooters, that marksmen are coming out, I would say, watch better shooters, but shoot your own game. Is you've got to be able to understand what your limits are, and your limits might not be running and gunning and going fast. I know they're not mine. So as long as I can shoot my pace and my type of shooting, then I should be able to do fairly well. And in the end, what is it? Somebody says, slow is fast, and so that might be the key to success for me.
Slow is, what is that?
Slow is fast, and
smooth is. Oh gosh, how does that go?
Yeah, it's something like that. Smooth is fast, and or something. Somebody's going to listen to this podcast and say, "I can't believe he didn't remember that."
Well, I should remember it. I've got a T-shirt that makes fun of that.
Yes.
I've got to look that up now.
Yep.
So, what do you think is the biggest? Again, both of us being the kind of the average shooters, still got a lot to learn. What do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned so far that has helped your shooting game?
I think it's a combination of watching folks like Mike Seeklander and Stephen Lowe and Aaron and Dwayne shoot their match. Is just having the patience to forget what's behind you and move on to the next, and you don't dwell on it. If you make a bad shot, you make a bad shot. It's patience. I mean, by nature, I'm a very, very competitive person, and I'm not so much competing with other people as I'm competing against myself, which is one of the things I like with this sport is no matter what happens, you are between the timers. When it goes off and when it stops, that's all you. You have no one else to, blame except the guy staring you back in the mirror. And you can't lie to that guy. You did or you didn't. You shot your stage or you didn't. And in the end, ultimately, you made all the decisions. So, stay within yourself, be patient. And as you just said, you gotta put that 40% practice time in.
Yep. So you've alluded to this a little bit previously, and we hear this a lot, but in your own words, what is it about IDPA that's great? I mean, there are other shooting disciplines that obviously are available to you in your part of Florida. You could move on or you could dabble in other things, or you could devote your time to other shooting sports. Why IDPA? What is it about IDPA that makes it special for you?
For me, and I think it's also the reason I choose to shoot CDP, is there are limits. I get 9 rounds of my first mag, and I get 2 rounds with 8 in it. And IDPA is the same thing. It's originally designed, from what I understand, to be a concealed type self-defense course. We try to design all of our stages like that to be realistic, that you're coming around a corner, you're defending your family, or you have something happen at work, and you have to use the resources. Well, in every day, I'm not carrying 57 magazines on me. Okay, my everyday carry piece, I've got 1 gun, 1 magazine, and it is a 45, and I've got 1 extra magazine. Or I also carry a little 380, the Springfield 911. Same basic concept. I've got 1 gun, 1 magazine extra, and that's it. I've got to plan everything else around that. And that's what I like about IDPA. And then, of course, as I've said many times, I've had very, very few bad experiences shooting throughout the country where I've shot. And there were in my early SO CSO days, there were some SO days where I'd show up to SO a distant match, folks that I didn't know about, and those got a little testy. But the folks, at least here in the Southeast region, we know each other. You're not trying to play one-upsmanship with the rules, so it's been a pretty smooth start. So camaraderie, and then like I said, I like the limits of what IDPA puts on you, whereas other disciplines, there's no limits on magazines or the number of rounds or when you reload or how you reload. You can dump things all over the ground, and, those types of things. So it just never interests me.
Right. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm really glad I got a chance to chat with you, and I really hope that 2021 I get a chance to meet you face to face and get together on the range and put some rounds down range as well.
That'd be fantastic. And I want to thank you for reaching out to me. Like I said, I really want to pay tribute to the folks that came before me as match director here at Port Malabar Rifle and Pistol Club, Alan Baker, Dwayne Charter, Randy Milan Williams. My entire Space Coast Challenge team just put it over the top. I mean, everything from the artwork that Gina Watson provided to everything we did. It's a team effort. There's at one point, people look at the match director and say that's the name on the top of the list, and ultimately, the buck does stop here. But as the saying goes, failures rest with me, and success rests with the team, and this success rests with the entire team. And I could not be prouder of the team that assembled to do this. So we'll hopefully we'll take another look and figure out a good time to do this again another time, maybe next year, and hopefully that team will still be around.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
You betcha. I appreciate the time.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our special guest, Paul Zima, for taking the time to sit down and chat and share his story with us today. Our next episode is coming in 2 weeks. That'll be episode 160. And like I said, we are going to be meeting another new guest, and hopefully we will be reviewing the results of our first 2 matches of the year, depending on whether or not the results have been posted. The South Mountain Showdown from Arizona and the Arctic Blast from Pennsylvania, both of those are coming up next weekend. Hopefully results will have been posted by the time episode 160 I recorded episode 160, so hopefully we will be reviewing the results of one or both of those matches in episode number 160 in 2 weeks. Thank you all for listening. Thank you especially to our patrons who support us financially. I really do appreciate your help and keeping the show going. And if you would like to be a sponsor or be a supporter of the show, consider becoming a patron. Visit patreon.com/unload or unloadpodcast.com/patron. We would really appreciate your support. Tune in again next time, episode number 160 coming in 2 weeks. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you then.